more for you, you feel it. You know it. This is your life, and it's time to go from contender to champion. This is the show. John Madsen.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. I'm your host, John Madsen. This is the show. Thanks again for being here with me today. I've got a good show for you. This one's going to hit hard. This one's going to hopefully open up your eyes. We're going to talk about my version of the 4 foundational attitudes that are required for ultimate success. You might be a parent with an athlete who plays in high school or plays in junior high school or is going through Little League. And this topic of attitude is going to be so important for the development of any athlete, any student, any young person who's trying to achieve anything. And not only that, it's going to be imperative for you as a parent or you as an adult who have your own goals, who have your own targets. Because this is the one thing that separates winners from losers. A person's attitude right off the bat. It's something that is very, very hard to hide. If I'm talking to a person or I'm observing them, I can see their attitude. I can hear their attitude. Very, very quickly. Almost in an instant. So learning to control your attitude or learning these 4 foundational attitudes will undoubtedly put you on the fast track to achieve whatever it is you want to achieve. Bad attitudes are as contagious as disease. If you're a coach, you know this. If another coach on your staff doesn't share the same attitude that you do, you'll watch how that demoralizes your staff. If you're a leader and you oversee a team, you'll notice how one bad attitude can affect the whole rest of the team. As a coach who's trying to win a championship, you will notice how 1 or 2 bad attitudes will demoralize the team. And you have no shot because it spreads like the most contagious disease in the world. I learned this from Urban Meyer when he came to the University of Utah. And I've talked about this probably a little bit in the past, but for anybody who's new here, Urban came in from Bowling Green, and he was a young coach, probably 36 at the time, and full of fire. Obviously, if you've ever watched him coach on the sidelines, you can probably tell a little bit what type of coach he was. But for us in the locker room, it was even more intense. You see, Urban operated from a set of principles, a philosophy that he had the utmost faith in. And because of his faith, we had faith. But during his very first stint at the University of Utah, he came in, we were picked to take like 7th in the Mountain West, which was a shitty conference back in the day. And Urban came in and he had a big banner hanging in the weight room. And the banner said, "Why not us? Why not now? Why not us? Why not now?" And I talk about his vision for us right from the start, to be a top 5 program ranked nationally. And I talked about how I thought he was crazy for thinking this at first, until we started to believe him, until we saw his faith was unshakable. But there was a few guys who were resistant to this change. And before we ever played our first game for Urban, there was literally 20 or so guys who quit. 20 guys who, some of which were starters on the last year's team, some of which were going to be starters on the next year team. Some of which who, instead of buying into the new regime, was so attached to the old ways that they were unwilling to adapt. This unwillingness showed up in uncoachableness. This uncoachableness had piss poor attitudes. You see, an Urban treated these attitudes like cancer. How do you get rid of cancer? Well, there comes a point in time when you have to remove it. So these people were removed of having the privilege of playing for the University of Utah. Didn't matter how good they were, didn't matter if they were stars, didn't matter if they were projected starters. You see, Urban knew back then that one bad apple would ruin the bunch, and that if we were going to be champions, we all had to acquire the championship attitude. And if one or two guys didn't acquire that championship attitude, their piss poor attitude would spread throughout the team. That just wasn't a chance Urban was going to take. And that's how collectively we became the closest team that I've ever been a part of. We didn't always like his coaching style or how intense it was. It wasn't always fun, like I said, to go out to practice. But what was fun was winning. What was fun was being known as champions. What was fun was seeing the progress. And it all started with creating this foundational attitude that permeated through the whole team. You see, attitude is funny. Attitude starts with the individual, but if you're working together in a group, that group collectively has an attitude. And so that's why this show is very important today. I'm going to go through the foundational attitudes, what I consider the foundational attitudes of a champion. Because if you are managing a team, if you're into sales and you're managing a group of salespeople, and if your result is tied to the result of others, there couldn't be a more important episode for you than to be able to put in framework what type of attitude that you want your team to exemplify. Now, the 4 foundational attitudes that I'm going to go through are mine. That's what I have for the people I coach. This is what they know that I demand as a leader. Not only do I demand it from my position of power, I exemplify it in my own doings. Because as a leader, if you are telling some of your people to do one thing, but yet they watch you and you don't embody that which what you're preaching, you will lose respect faster than you can believe. So if you're in a position of power, if you're a leader, these are not just words. This isn't just a mission statement which you can project onto the group you're trying to lead. You have to live it. If you don't live it, your words don't mean shit. Even if you have some things that you're like, John, that's really good, but for my team, I want this attitude. That's fine. Because whatever your foundational attitudes are, you have to know what they are. Your people, your team, the group of people you're coaching have to know what they are, but they have to look at you as a leader, and you can't be a bullshitter. Because if you lead by example, you'll get followers. You'll have influence. If you say one thing but you do another, you'll be a fucking hypocrite. You won't have followers. You'll have a bunch of people who know you're bullshitting yourself. So let's dive into these foundational attitudes. Super, super important. The first foundational attitude that I have is courage. In a lot of the frameworks I teach, this one comes up over and over and over again. But in terms of attitude and this foundational attitude, the courage I'm speaking of is the courage to fucking lose. And that might sound funny because I'm always talking about focusing on what you want to happen and not paying attention to anything that you don't want to happen. But here, I want you to understand that the most dangerous thing you can have is a fearlessness to give it your all and lose. A fearlessness to not give a fuck what anybody thinks about you. A fearlessness to not care if another person believes that you're successful or unsuccessful. Because if you have this kind of vulnerability and courage, you will be fucking unstoppable. If you don't, you'll be timid. If you don't, you'll be afraid to fail. And by being afraid to fail, you will not be able to give it 100%. You'll always have an excuse in your back pocket about why you couldn't do the thing. This type of courage, the courage to lose, the courage to go all in, give it your all, and if you don't win that day, you'll learn from it. That's it. When I talk to young athletes, this is what I demand of them. When I have my daughter who's going to grow up, and maybe she likes sports, maybe she wants to be a musician, whatever she wants to do, the first foundational attitude that I'm going to teach and I'm going to continue to teach is that whatever you do it with courage. I don't care if you win or lose. What I do care is that you go out there and you play your heart out. And you give it your 100%. And you play with fearlessness. Because if you lose, it won't affect you. If you lose, you'll learn your lesson and you'll be better next time. I don't care if you lose. You don't care if you lose. What we do care is that you give it your all. And that takes a lot of courage, because that means putting your heart out there for every single person to see. If you're into sales or you're into business or you're an entrepreneur and you're thinking about what you need to do in 2020 to succeed beyond your wildest your wild imagination, whatever that is, I want you to think about having the courage to lose, having the courage to fail, having the courage to put your whole heart into something that may or may not work out. That's vulnerability, that's courage. But that's a foundational attitude that you must have. And if you're coaching a team, they can't be afraid to make a mistake. They can't be afraid to lose. If you coach basketball and you have 5 guys or 5 girls who play with their whole hearts out on the floor, you will not lose. The problem is kids are afraid to fail. The problem is kids are afraid to give it their all, because if they do, and they fail, they're afraid of that. So as a coach, as a leader, teach this foundational attitude. Make it known. Have it permeate throughout your whole organization. Give them the courage and live the code. The second foundational attitude is this. Coachable. You have to be coachable. Your team has to be coachable. And being coachable isn't just mindlessly doing every single thing that the coach says. You can have your own brain, you can have your own mind. But being coachable is buying into the vision of that team. When I coach athletes or when I coach business people around the world, being coachable is having the willingness to let go of a faulty belief system that's been holding them back. It's a willingness to venture into something new, something that you may not have tried before, and to get a different result than you're currently getting. We all know the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same result. That's the epitome of not being coachable. As a player in sport, as a player in business, as a leader, you have to be flexible. You have to be coachable. You have to be able to think out of the box. You have to be able to do some of the things that your leader or your coach needs you to do. And one of the biggest tips I can give you on this is if you're trying something new and you're learning from somebody who's done it before, go into it with a beginner's mind. Don't go into it thinking you know it all, because some of those belief systems that you've built in the past from another coach, another mentor, another team, another business, if you're still not getting the result and you're tied to your old ways, there's no way in hell you're going to get the result that you actually want. Being coachable and learning from somebody else who's actually done it, who has the success that you want, is of the utmost importance. The third foundational attitude is this: relentless persistence. Relentless persistence. Because we go back to number 1 and I talk about the courage to lose. You see, if you don't have number 3, relentless persistence, if you lose, then after a certain number of times you quit and you never achieve the goal. But if you have the courage to lose and you play with your whole heart and you get back up every time you get knocked down, and every time a business deal doesn't go your way, every time you miss a sell, you evaluate and you learn from it and you persist. Relentless persistence. You will never fucking quit. I will die before I lose. When you play with relentless persistence, in the long term, you cannot lose. You might lose a couple battles, but you'll win the war. See, all of these things work together. Number 1, number 2, number 3, they all work together. Having the courage to lose only works if you have relentless persistence, because if you don't, after you lose enough times, you'll quit. And to tie this whole thing together, number 4, my fourth foundational attitude is being overly positive. Overly positive. I've never met a successful person who's a negative Nancy. Never. You see, the way we view the world, the way we speak, our body language is our representational system of the actual reality we're living in, which is different from person to person. We don't really live in the world that is. We live in our own represented world based on our thoughts, our emotions, our behavior, our focus. So a person who thinks negative will always have motherfucking negative things show up. A person who don't think it's possible, it will never be possible for. A person who sees endless possibility will have possibilities pile up day after day, month after month, year after year. Opportunities will show up for them. They are magnets for massive opportunity because they're looking for them. And positivity isn't just this false hope. Positivity is in every ounce of your cells. Every ounce of your being. It shows up in your language patterns, which I've done extensive shows about. How you talk. How you act. You see, some of the people think that coaches don't like them, that bosses don't like them, that they're not favored. And so they live out this self-fulfilling prophecy. They go into work or they go into the team, and when the coach says something, they say, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. And their body language is mopey as fuck. But yet when you talk to them, they're like, I'm doing everything right. I do what the coach asks. I don't understand why he doesn't like me. I don't understand why she doesn't like me. It's your energy. You have a negative aura about you. People can feel that shit. You know when you talk to somebody who just lifts you up and they're positive and they're enthusiastic and they're charismatic, and after you get done talking to them, you're like, shit, I feel better. I feel better because it's this energy, it's this frequency. So when people think that other people don't like them, they got to check themselves. How are you acting? What are your body language telling the other person? It's not just about what you say, it's how you act, how you are. You have to be conscious about that at first, until it's an unconscious behavior, until you're so fucking positive that every motherfucker you come in contact to throughout the day can feel your presence. Because those are the people that are favored, but it's not an accident. Some people have to work harder for it. But all of these things are what I talk about when I talk about foundational attitudes, whether it's an athlete, whether it's a businessman, whether we're trying to go to the next level. I coach people all around the world. This is what we talk about. Number 1, having the courage to lose. Number 2, being coachable. Number 3, having relentless persistence. And number 4, being overly positive. So I want you to think about this as a person in power, as a leader, as somebody who's leading a team. Maybe you're on a team. What is your foundational attitudes? What is the attitude that you want your team to embody? It doesn't have to be mine, but it has to be something, because if everybody is just floating around with nothing and they don't know what you as a leader demand, or if you're saying something and you're living something else, they're not going to believe you. But I know this one thing, and I learned it from Urban. In order for you to win a championship, You've got to have a champion's attitude. And that champion's attitude has to be developed. It's not going to get there by chance. Think about what you want your team to embody. Make it and live it.
Thank you so much for joining us for another amazing episode of The Show with John Madsen. The greatest compliment that you could give us is liking, loving, and sharing this episode with all of your friends. So please go to iTunes, leave us a 5-star rating and review, and then share it online with everyone that you know. Make sure to tag John as well. He loves to hear from listeners of the show. The links for all of his socials and iTunes are in the show notes. Also, if you'd like to engage John for anything related to his coaching, consulting, or programs, please visit johnmadsen.com for everything you'd need to know on how to engage with John offline. And lastly, thank you for your time, your attention, and your consideration. This is The Show.